Hello everyone, Todd Shelnut here with CFI Pro Courses, and welcome to a long-awaited edition of Regulation Wednesday. This event is, I think, probably one it's going to be a rather memorable type event that we have to go over today, and that's this new change that the FAA just came out with in regards to the instrument check ride, or basically the instrument rating, in which we've been left with this ever since I've really been in the industry. We've really kind of struggled with these three approaches using different type of navigation systems that we have for our instrument rating. And I have seen many a check rides stall over this stuff. So I'm glad the FAA was able to come out. If you haven't seen it already, this is going to be what we're talking about today. So sit back and relax. If you don't know what we're talking about, you're going to here in just a minute, but we're going to be talking about a lot of different words and lingos that the FAA uses in order to confuse people. So here we go. Let's look and see exactly what came out. We'll first look at the email, and then we'll look at the FAA site and see what happened there. Stand by. All right, everyone. We're going to start off by, well, how did I know about it? Well, I get this email here that comes to me from the FAA. And this was received a little bit over 8 hours ago. All the way they just came out with this thing. Actually, like last night they came out with it. And on this email, it has a couple of items to it. It has comments for questions you can send down to AFS 800. And where you can also go to see the recession memo where they did this. And so first off, let's take a look at the memo. We're not going to take a look at it in its entirety at this particular point because we want to be able to kind of break it down into pieces and see what we have to offer. So if you're new to letter of interpretations, basically it's the very top of who it comes from and why it was released or who actually requested it. So this is all those people up there, and it's basically a reconsider this illegal interpretation. And it deals with two legal interpretations. One is the letter of interpretations are labeled by the last name of the person requesting it and the year it was issued. So we have Glaser 2008 and Pratte 2012. And it goes down here, and I'll paraphrase just a little bit. It says, this memorandum is in response to the requested date of the original, which is basically almost a year ago, May, for reconsideration of these two legal interpretations that I just aforementioned, and for the instrument training that's required under 6165, specifically 6165 Delta 2 IIC. So first off, let's go to 6165 Delta 2 IIC and see what that says. So here we go. I am here at 6165, and we'll go down to Delta, which is the aeronautical experience required for the instrument airplane rating. And Delta 2 IIC. Actually, let's see here. 62, yeah, IIC. And what we see here at IIC, so it says the instrument flight training on cross-country flight procedures, including one cross-country flight in an airplane with an authorized instructor who is performing, that is performed under instrument flight rules when a flight plan has been filed with air traffic control facility that involves this, and lastly, three different kinds of approaches with the use of navigation systems. So this is the phrase that has caused much headache over the past, ever since I've been in aviation. This has caused a lot of headache. So luckily we were able to have those two letter of interpretations, which we didn't do anything for us. And I say us, we're talking about the common man, the end user, the instructor, the student, the pilot, whoever's training. All right. So let me slide that right over there because there's another. We're going to come back to part 97 here shortly. All right, so this thing goes on and says to say that 65 Delta contains the aeronautical experience, and that's fine. And it states that in relevant part, person must have 40 hours. And again, here's this three kinds of approaches with the use of navigation systems. So in the past, the FAA has stated through this Glaser and through Pratte that it had to be through the use of the three different navigation systems. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that let's look at Glaser here and see what it says. And I'm gonna put all these links down in the bottom. By the way, the FAA has removed them. The FAA has removed them from their site, but I'm going to give you access to them anyhow. I found mine off of a PDF host here, but I'll put them into my Amazon Drive and give you a link down below. And of course, here is standard letter of interpretation. Goes back to Mr. Glaser way back in where he requested it on November 5th, 2007, and it took him. Actually, that's pretty quick. It's like 5 months it took them to get back. That's pretty quick for them. And they were questioning the letter of interpretation, and this was based off 2 items. One was that you may not know this, but there's other approaches that you don't do during instrument training, or let me rephrase that. You may not have done during your instrument training as a civilian pilot, and that is a PAR, an ASR, and like microwave approaches and stuff like that. So they list some approaches, and then they don't list some approaches. So the ASR and the PAR are not the approaches that's actually listed as approaches you can do in this procedure. Now, how do we know what approaches we can and we cannot do? For that, you have to ask yourself 2 questions. One question is, are you just training, or are you checking? Okay, so in order to meet the requirement of the old regulation, with this letter of interpretation here, it basically says that they want you to complete 3 different types of approaches using 3 different forms of navigation systems. So they kind of double whammied it. 3 different type of approaches using 3 different type of navigation systems. And it says here you can pick any one that the pilot may choose, any 3 of the following nav systems, and there you go. And then it says ASR and PAR are not on the list below because they don't qualify as a navigation system. Rather, they're radar tracking systems, blah, 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 which if you've never done a PAR approach and you have a military facility next to you that allow you to do that as a civilian, what a great thing to do. I always love to teach my instrument students how to do a PAR approach if one is available. So here's the different type of approaches, and this is what they put in there. Again, this is as time is moving on. This is back in 2008. All right, so time is moving on. Technology is moving forward. And as technology moves forward, people get more options, like how many different types of GPS approaches can you do? You follow me where I'm going here? Yeah, so on the Instrument Landing System Localizer, you have the ILS or the localizer. And don't we do one of each using the same navigation system? Yep, we don't do different navigation systems on that, right? So there's another argumentative point on that. So this is the one that was written to Glaser that says you can only choose between these 6, you can choose 3 of them, which most people do, the localizer, the VOR, and GPS. And so that's one of them there. But where is the list of approaches that you can actually do? Well, the list of approaches on the check ride that you can do are actually listed in the instrument ACS. Now, I have that open right over here. And it's in the back of it. It's on page 50 if you're in a PDF. If you want to go to the page, it's A16. And it actually lists the types of non-precision approaches that you can use on the check ride and the type of precision approaches. Now, the weird thing about this is that this is the approaches that's allowed to be done on the check ride. And here's the next confusing part. These precision approaches down here, not all of them can be considered a precision approach out in real life. Like, for instance, they allow you on the check ride to do a LPV as long as the DA is the approach minimum is at 300 foot or lower. So either way, if you're out outside of a check ride, an LPV approach does not count as a precision approach. Only if you're doing a check ride, and only if the approach minimum is down to 300 foot or less. Isn't that weird? So you can't even count that. So the really only type of the things you can do in real life is just an ILS approach. Until they change how they do things, that's just the way it is. Let's go back over here and look at Glaser. So here we got the 6 type of approaches, right? So years later, they get a little bit upset and they write another one. So Mr. Pratt writes another letter. And so Mr. Pratt wrote and said, hey, come on now. You need to go back and look at this because you're just reading it wrong. And I'll tell you the phrase here. I'm going to show you the phrase that the FAA legal department loves to. They love to say to us layman's. I'll show you what that is. I love this phrase. But it says on March 18th, 2008, the FAA issued a legal interpretation to Glaser and concluded that an approach using an airport surveillance radar or a PAR did not meet the satisfied requirements because they do not qualify as navigation systems. So they're still stuck on this navigation systems being the type of approaches. And it says here that conclusion remains unchanged. And this really just kind of backs up and says, hey, we're really going to stand our ground and don't really contact us again. We appreciate it, but we're not going to do that. And then they also list this other, what constitutes a different kind of approach allowed, that the office will amend Advisory Circular AC 6165E accordingly. And that's never had anything about the type of approaches, so I don't know why they're trying to amend that. But anyway, so we're following along so far, Glaser and Pratte, that was the 2 letter of interpretations that set the stage for this rescission. And so here is the official memo as we go down. Let's see, I think I had another copy over here. Let me close that out. So it's basically staying here that, hey, well, you know what? We've made a mistake. And for the reasons provided in this memo, and we've decided to rescind the Glaser and Pratte interpretations, which is the reason why you can't find them on the FAA's website anymore. But again, I'm going to put them down in the comment sections for you. So here it says that the Glaser interpretation inaccurately summarizes the language in 65 D2IIC as requiring the use of 3 different approaches of navigation systems. And the most important thing, when you're reading this rescission, every time it has one of these little notes here, note 1, you need to go down to the bottom and you need to read what it says. That's the only way this stuff is ever really going to make sense to you. But basically what it says here is they were confused. It's not different type of navigation systems. It's actually different type of approaches. And here is the wording that I absolutely hate when they use. The regulations plain language. There's no plain language. If there was plain language, we wouldn't have these thousands of letters of interpretation if it's plain language. Come on, FAA Legal Department. Come on. Get with it. So here's what happens in regards to this. In short, in skinny, as you're going down through and you're becoming familiar with this letter of interpretation, it states that when you're out there, you can just do a different type of approach. Now, I would beg to differ here that as you go through this and you see that it rescinds this whole thing of the reason why they said that and the backing behind it was they said, well, we just don't define it enough. So what regulation covers instrument approaches? Well, that's Part 97. So you're looking at these different definitions they try to throw in here, like approach and instrument approach procedure. But if you go over here to Part 97 and you start looking up these different words that you're trying to find, like how do we define that? How do we define instrument approach procedure? How do we define that? Well, guess what? They don't. They don't define it. I guess it's plain language, huh? Plain language? Yep. So, therefore, 3 different should be read as solely modifying kinds of approaches in 6165. And those kinds of approaches are listed in the instrument ACS, page A16. That's where those non-precision and precision, the kinds of approach or the type of approach. Okay. So here it says kinds of approaches, 3 different kinds of approaches. I think they should put types of approaches because that makes it equal to what it is in the ACS. And really would be just even better clarification. It would be even more plain language now, wouldn't it? Absolutely. It goes on to say that the Glaser interpretation does analyze ASR and PAR, and that they actually should be considered an approach. Again, you have the ASR and PAR. Then it goes on to say and wraps it up, and it says that the FAA finds that PAR should be considered an acceptable navigation system under 1.1 or under that reg because 1.1 defines a precision approach procedure of that. And if you, like I said, if you've ever done a PAR approach, what a cool thing. Do some research on that and see what it is. They talk you through the approach all the way down. It's so incredibly cool. So incredibly cool. They just talk you through. A little bit left, a little bit right, a little bit high, a little bit low. They tell you when you're approaching your glide slope. They tell you when you drop your gear. I tell you everything. It's pretty cool stuff. And so to kind of look over here and look at some other things here, one is that the ACS does depict what type of approach or kind of approaches that you can do. And then here's the AC 6165. It doesn't say anything about the instrument in here, about what's going on. I've thoroughly searched that. And then, of course, lastly is the 8260-3 type of procedure. So 8260-3, do you know what that is? So let me show you over here what that is. Again, it's at the bottom of this recension here. The 8260.3. See this down here? It says parts 97. Consider an approach. Use ASR as an example of non-precision approach procedure. So why don't we get to count that as a non-precision? We get to count the PAR as a precision. Why can't we count the ASR as a non-precision? Well, because it doesn't show up in here. So we've got to make sure that we're all jiving together and we're all looking at the same thing, because it can be somewhat confusing, especially if you just look at all the things I have on the screen up here just to talk about this one item. So please make sure that when you're looking at these letter of interpretations, what is it saying? It's saying that you no longer have to do 3 different type of navigational systems. It's just three kinds of approaches. Okay? If you don't understand anything, or if you have any further questions about this, this was basically a more direct thing for me to give you tonight for Regulation Wednesday, and hopefully you understand what we're trying to do here with this. It's really going to solve a lot of problems. This notice was sent out to everyone. If you're registered on the FAA's website to receive these things, it was sent out via that format. I received mine via DMS through the designee training process. So it just depends on, where you're getting it from. You should always subscribe and make sure you get these emails so you'll be smarter. Get better, get smarter, know your trade. Post any comments down below if you want to talk about this more. If you have any questions for it, I'll be happy to answer anything you have. If I have the answer for it, and if I don't know it, I'll make it up. All right. I'm Todd Shunnett with CFI Pro Courses. I hope you enjoyed this session of Regulation Wednesday, because this is going to be a game changer to our industry in regards to arguments in the field and in regards to what you must do on these long cross-country flights when you're out there flying and you're trying to battle to find 3 different types of navigation systems to use for your approaches. You guys and girls have a great week, and I'll see you at the airport, if not one day, on a check ride. Take care.